You're listening to theoutdoorstation.co.uk.
Welcome to the Travel Show.
I think it's a splendid idea.
Podcasting around the world.
The UK's best podcasting show for world travellers of all ages. The work of a genius.
It's a podcast full of hints and tips for travellers of all ages travelling to all places.
It's all about getting out and having much more fun.
Hello, welcome back once again to the Travel Show on the Outdoor Station, where we hope to inspire, inform and excite listeners of all ages about the exciting world of travel. Although some of these podcasts may seem to be aimed at a younger gap year student age, we also talk with others at a later stage in their career, such as Jane Smith, a friend and neighbour who is a ICT supply teacher for local primary schools here in the very rural town of Malvern, right in the heart of England. Jane, a lady of a certain age, shall we say, had the opportunity via one of the schools she works with to visit a very rural part of Gambia, well off the beaten track. Now, this was definitely an out-of-the-box experience for Jane to consider, as she had very little travelling experience off the established tourist trails. So, I first started by asking her if she had to think twice about the opportunity when the time came to make the final decision.
Yes, it's something I wouldn't have chosen to do, just off independently, but the opportunity arose and it appealed to me. But I did have to give it some thought, and I don't really know why at all now, because it was just so wonderful. I wonder why I haven't done it before.
So just give us some background. Just explain how it came to be that a small school in Worcestershire has got a link with these schools in Gambia.
It started with the head of a school in Hagley, who'd had quite some links with another small school for some time, and it's developed. The head at Castle Morton heard about it, was invited to join them, and there are now 3 schools in Worcestershire that have links with these schools in the Gambia, Janjanburry and around, and it's supported by the British Council.
And I understand it's a 3-year funded project as such. They're supporting it, but there is a reason for them supporting it.
Yes. We're just at this year will be the last of the 3 years, but our remit is to produce educational books on life in the Gambia, which will be published for use here and for the schools in the Gambia. But we also produce similar books about life in the UK, which will just be published for them in the Gambia.
So let's look at the first trip then, which was in 2005, I think you said.
Yes, February 2005.
So it's February 2005. It's your first trip outside of Europe as such. What were your big fears?
I really don't know. I can't remember now because they're so insignificant. I think it was possibly just being in a totally different environment. Possible health concerns. I really don't remember.
Now, these schools aren't, shall we say, typical main town schools. These are, you've used the phrase a couple of times, upriver. Just describe that, paint a picture for us on that.
Well, if people have been to the Gambia for a holiday, they've been to the coast. And on the coast, you've got your typical, hotels. They're not, they wouldn't be classed as very grand here. But as soon as you get away from the urban area, you've got to remember the Gambia is very small. It's only 10 miles either side of the river. And so there's one road south of the river and there's one road north, all the way along.
Oh, right, okay.
Very tiny. And we're on an island in the middle of the Gambia River, and it's Central River Division. And it used to be one of the British, when the British were a protectorate there, it used to be one of their kind of admin centres. And as soon as you get away, say 30, 40 miles away from the coast, then I don't think I was really prepared for travelling along the road and seeing all the mud huts. I wasn't prepared for that, and it was just fascinating.
So you went presumably from Heathrow?
No, we went from Bristol that year. We went from Manchester last year.
And the flight was how long?
It's about 6.5 hours.
Okay, and then you land... Is it there you land, or do you do another shuttle run?
Banjul, and we stay the night at the coast. So we have one night of luxury where we have a flushing toilet.
And you thought, this is nice.
And a swimming pool, and near the coast, so we'd have a quick swim in the sea. But then there are various things that we want to buy before we go upriver. And you go to the supermarket, which is sells everything, usual supermarket commodities and great big dark wood furniture and bikes and everything, but still manage to look like our local spa and so on. And then the decision has to be made about which route you take, whether you go on the South Road or whether you go on the North Road. And the South Road was tarmacked about well over 30 years ago now. And therefore the majority of villages have settled around it. But it is, as you get further and further away, it is just deep, deep potholes. And we travelled at times at about 15 miles an hour. That journey, 180 miles, took us 11.5 hours.
And so you're travelling, in an old Land Rover or in a new air-conditioned bus? What sort of... Describe it for us. And what was the weather like? Presumably fairly pleasant, or a bit too pleasant?
Very nice. No, it's very pleasant. It was lovely and warm. Temperature at the moment is in the 90s, so it was similar to that. But we had... the head of one of the schools had organised and hired a minibus. Now, that minibus, I don't think would pass an MOT here, and a driver, Abdulai, who was delightful. And that travelled up with us and stayed with us for the whole week and brought the teachers back to the coast again. And there were times when you were sitting in the back and the back doors were bolted and you were tilting precariously that you thought, well, if it does roll over, what do you do? There's no way you could get out. So it was a bit scary. And the way I coped with it, and of course it gets dark at 7. We didn't leave until about midday. It gets dark at 7, so there's nothing to see except the occasional torch from somebody walking along the road. And the way I coped with it was to think that this was going to be my life from then on and not expect it to end, so it was very pleasant when it did end. And then you have to get the ferry across onto the island. It takes about 2 or 3 vehicles.
Right, okay.
The alternative is to go on the North Road, but then you have to cross the mouth of the Gambia, and you can wait. If you're lucky, the minimum will be 2 hours that you wait to go across on the ferry. Lorries wait 5 or 6 days.
So it's not exactly National Express coaches we're talking about here.
No. There used to be better transport on the South Road, but because of the condition, people won't go that way. We now go on the North Road, which has been developed tremendously, and I think even since last year, the journey took about 4.5 hours last year, which is phenomenal, and I think it's been improved, but you've still got the ferry to get across on.
OK, well, let's just move on to the actual schools now that you visit and the villages there and their sort of lifestyle. I've seen some of the photographs and it looks very sort of... would I be right in describing it as a mud hut village, but quite well organised?
On Janjanburh itself, that's the island, the school is the Methodist, and all the equivalent of primary schools are lower basic schools. It's called the Methodist school, started by the missionaries there in kind of 1860s, I think. And that's a series of concrete block houses, tin roofs, as is the one in Barabba. Now, our school, Castle Morton, the link is with Barabba School. And we have to go off onto the south bank, and it's about 4 miles away, and that's concrete block houses, buildings. And most of the schools are. But around Barabba, the closest buildings are mud huts. So the children, majority of them come from homes which are mud huts. And the same with the third school, which is Serangai, which is near the border of Senegal, and that's very much out in fuller country.
I know that the schools that you work in here, do supply here, have obviously, well, I suppose these days got now interactive whiteboards and IT centres and a lot of facilities we take for granted there. Just describe their school surroundings, if you would.
Well, going into Baraba School, the classrooms are in one long line and 2 or 3 more at right angles. Open breeze blocks, no need for glass. And in there, there'll be desks, very old wooden desks. There'll be a blackboard. And around the classroom will be some resources that teachers have made. They've drawn on sugar paper and so on, and that's basically it.
So, I mean, you said earlier on to me that if they're lucky, they've got some chalk for the blackboard, and if they're lucky, they've got some pencils, but probably not very little paper to write on.
Yes, that's the situation. We always buy as many exercise books as we can when we go. We take with us. 2 years ago, I took a case absolutely crammed full of felt tips and biros and pencils, rulers, all that. Because, for one thing, they're difficult to buy in the area. Something which seems so silly, last year we bought exercise books. They're cheaper at the coast. But transporting them, Feifei, the head at Baraba, she brought them back with her. Much better quality for the same price for much poorer ones in Janjanbureh. But the physical difficulty of bringing them, carrying them on the top of a geli, having to pay extra for the transport, having to pay for them to come across on the ferry. Just simple things that you just don't give any thought to. So they often do not have supplies. And children, wherever you go, children ask you for a pencil, please. Do you have a pencil, please?
After the initial sort of culture shock wore off of the first few days and you sort of settled into your environment, how did you feel? What were your thoughts about what you were doing as a group of teachers and the project in itself?
Quite honestly, I think we probably get a tremendous amount from it. I think when the teachers come back into our schools, our children gain a great deal from it. In just seeing black people and communicating with them and realising that they are just the same as anybody else. I find it hard to really know what they get from it, because they must find it so frustrating that we have so much. What we try to do is bring in very practical things into the school. Last year we took dice and we tried to teach them games which they could play with dice. This year we're taking number lines and just trying to introduce something very, very small. But it is quite hard to actually see the changes that you are making. Well, not that you're not make change, ideas that you're trying to introduce.
So you obviously weren't on your own with this group, and we say a group. Give me an idea of how many were actually in the group that went from this area.
The first year we went, there were 3 teachers from Castle Morton. There's another school, Ribbenhall, near Bewdley. There were 4 teachers went from there. And possibly, I don't know, about 8 from Hagley. It is a bigger school, but they choose to... as many people as want to go, and then, they obviously all make contributions themselves. I think this year there are 13 teachers going and just 2 teachers from Castle Morton.
Because you're actually off in a few weeks' time, aren't you?
2 weeks' time.
Excellent. Well, I know your particular area of interest and the work you do at school is with the ICT. Is this something you've taken over there as well?
Yes, and it's possibly one of the reasons why I spread my time between 2 aspects. When we arrive, if it's at the weekend, we spend the Sunday on a river trip down the Gambia with the teachers from the 3 schools concerned, the 3 Gambian schools, and it's a chance to meet them. And I was just chatting to one, Abdu, and he was an unqualified teacher at Methodist school, but he also worked as a volunteer at a skills centre which is called Gamspad. And they had just acquired then 2 fairly new computers, and they needed some help. And I was invited to go along, and from that has developed a very close link with them. And they now have 14 or 15 computers. I wouldn't say they're working. I think about 10 are working now. And since September, they have actually been able to, with the help of Peace Corps and VSO volunteers there, they've just run their first term of very simple computer lessons. And when I go over this year, then I hope to be able to help with that as well.
Yeah, you see, when you start talking about computers and skills centres, you sort of instantly start thinking of white ceilings and walls and touchscreen technology and so on. Let's try and get this in perspective. You were telling me that they gather together the computers in various formats. The electricity was only on for a short period of time, and that they struggled to get the electricity to the computers.
Well, last year, when I went the first year, they had a very small generator, extremely noisy, which powered the 2 computers they had. When I arrived last year, they then had... It was a British couple who had collected these computers. They actually lived in the Gambia. They shipped them over. They had enormous trouble getting them out of the docks and then transporting them up to Janjanbureh. But all credit to them. They built a room, and it's a good, high, spacious room with workbenches with computers in. But when I went, they had managed to get funding for a much bigger generator, but they couldn't have it anywhere near because of the noise, and they could not connect it because they needed 30 metres of cable. And they couldn't purchase that 30 metres of cable until somebody went up to the coast. Now, that somebody was me when I returned a couple of weeks later, and it eventually got back up. And that is giving the supply. Although there is now, when we were there last year, there were electricity pylons going up. And the island now does have electricity, but I know at one time when I had an email from them, they were looking at whether they could afford to have it connected and whether they can afford to run it.
I suppose the next stage really is TV, that they'll get there as well. Do you think that'll benefit them or spoil it, as it were? Their sort of views of a wider world?
Well, I saw TV last year when I was staying with my host's family at the coast, and they ran their TV by connecting to a car battery, and what was on offer would not enlighten them too much at the moment. There was an hour of a Spanish soap every night, which was dubbed in English. And there seemed to be an hour of 2 bishops talking to each other live. And considering that 90% are Muslims, I'm not quite sure why. I don't know if I just saw very limited television, but they certainly won't have access to the kind of TV that we have. So, but yes, you do. One thing which struck me incredibly is they imagine that the UK is heaven. And when I went to one school, I was introduced to the chief of the region, and I met his first wife. And then I met his second wife, who was very, very young, because they can have 4 wives as Muslims. And she handed me her baby, who was months old, and said, "Take to the UK. She'll have a better life." And that just destroyed me, you know. And they won't. The quality of their life is... They've got a very, very good quality in many ways, and they have a very distorted view of what is good in the UK.
Interesting. We'll come on and talk about the actual characters and the people themselves and where you stayed in a moment. But I know that as part of this funding, it is a swap, so the teachers come over here, and I think they've been over twice now. Is that right? But anyway,
right from the very start, there's been 4 visits now to Castle Morton School.
so they've come from this, well, we would say poor village, certainly with probably very little in the way of infrastructure. What impression has Worcestershire, Malvern made on them, do you think?
Malvern in particular, hilly.
So they don't do hills, do they?
No, they don't do hills. Gambia is incredibly flat. They find it incredible to look out and look down, for one thing. But apart from that, our schools, I don't know how they comprehend what is around them. The first year when they visited here, I was too embarrassed to ask them into my home. I was so ashamed of all the things that I have. Now it doesn't worry me because they just accept you as you are, and they don't seem to be envious in any way. But how they take back what they see in our schools and put anything into practice in their own schools in the circumstances which they are, I don't know. I'll be very interested when I go back this time to see if there have been any changes in their way of teaching. Perhaps a little bit more practical work, a little bit more. To say child involvement is wrong, because when you're sitting in a class, when you're sitting anywhere in a Gambian school, you hear children singing and chanting the whole time.
So they teach by rote,
Yes.
probably, yeah.
Yes, and chanting through from 1 to 100, one after the other, and going into Sewing Guy's school where I had to take over while the head met with the village elders and the staff and left me with rather a large class. And they have set books, they have set textbooks, and that day would be the equivalent of year 1 and 2, I suppose. They'd been looking at books and on the board were drawings of mango and banana, and the child would come out and say M-A-N-G-O, mango, and everybody would sing it back. And then another child would come out and say M-A-N-G-O, and everybody would go M-A-N-G-O, mango. So they learn. That's their way of learning, and they do. It's incredible. They do learn. They're so eager to learn as well.
Yes, yeah. I'm just listening to you saying about the way they conversed as well in school. I read somewhere on your notes that you never heard a baby crying.
No. They're carried all the time. They're carried on, in the slings on their mothers' backs. Constant contact. There's older brothers or sisters when they're toddlers to look after them. And there's always somebody else around. If there is a baby is a centre of attention often.
So there's a collective responsibility,
Yes.
whether they're family or villagers, presumably.
The
I was gonna
extended family is... I was thinking about this the other day. The money which they earn is not for things, it's for people. It is the responsibility of any person who has any income to look after his family, and that family could be a very extended family. I would stay with my host, and when I'd come back from this skills centre, which I had to stop when it was dark because we couldn't see anything, and I'd be escorted back, and I'd come into Tida's room, and she had a big room, and after a while, as my eyes adjusted to the candlelight, I'd suddenly see a pair of smiling, well, just the teeth on the whole, smiling at me, and there'd be somebody else there, and, I'd ask, who's this person? Oh, it's just somebody who needed some shelter or help. He's a brother. And I learnt to say in the end, is it a blood brother? Oh, well, it's my... And there'd be this long, convoluted...
story.
Yeah, well, connection somewhere. And I really think that I could go on a plane now, get off the plane, and go and knock on a compound, on a gate to a compound and say... I know so-and-so in Janjanbureh but I'm a long way away, can I come and stay here? And they would take you in.
Wow. Just describe a bit what the accommodation was like then. The house, the family you stayed with, and the sort of lifestyle, and in particular, obviously, for other people that might be considering something like this, any particular items which were important, like mozzie nets or whatever.
Yes, mosquito nets are essential. Although the time that we go, I've never been aware of mosquitoes because we're there in the dry season. I think it would be very different in the rainy season, which is really from July to October kind of time. But it would be silly not to assume that there were none around. Yes, mosquito net. The sheet liner of a sleeping bag is all you need to sleep in. You obviously need your malaria tablets, and we use spray. We were very cautious about it, but as I say, and certainly people have been. I know of a group travelling, and somebody had got malaria and was in hospital. So it is a problem.
And I presume practical things like head torches and so on.
Oh yes, my head torch. Was absolutely wonderful and caused great hilarity, especially if I had it flashing. But the major problem, I had to be very careful to have it angled up because I could, and people were a bit offended if I flashed it in their eyes. I didn't mean to intentionally. But yes, a torch is an essential.
So let's talk about the house. What was the house like where you stayed?
They vary. In Janjanbureh, because there are lots of different ethnic groups, Janjanbureh is mainly Mandinka. The Mandinkas, on the whole, tend to have these concrete block houses, corrugated roofs. Everybody lives in a compound, so there's a walled area or a fenced area with a gate, and within that compound there could be several kind of areas and buildings. At Tida's, as you went in, there was a big long room which had a kind of communal room where we would eat, and there were settees, always very big plush settees wherever I went. Off that room were 3 bedrooms on either side, and at the back there was a toilet and a shower area.
So are we talking like a breeze block building that's rough painted, or is it more finished than that? No,
yes. Tida's is nice.
Wooden floor, concrete floor?
I think it's concrete, but it has lino on it. But then Tida is a retired head teacher, so a little bit more affluent. But, you know, I went into it was mainly the Fuller tribe, and they were originally the nomads, so they are. This is why they have the mud huts, mud hut thatched roof, beautifully woven. When you look up at one, just see the beautiful circular weaving to form the base for the thatch, and enormous beds, enormous double beds with very ornate headboards, often covered in a mosquito net. And then possibly just 1 or 2 chairs. Again, could be quite plush. Others, the head at Seringai, he actually lived in Janjanbureh but went to Seringai during the week. His hut was just a bed and a bench, and that was it. And there would be a water tap somewhere within, possibly a few metres.
And I presume to get around these, that they were either walking or cycling.
There's quite a good gullies, the local kind of taxis, the minibuses. There's quite a good system along the main road that drops off. And in the urban area, you would go up to the main road, and various gullies would come along, and there would be a boy calling out the destination, which could be going off in all directions. But yes, you would see some people cycling, but walking, yes. A lot of walking.
Excellent.
Plus the ferries as well, to get on and off the island for us, north and south.
Now, I know that each year you've individually raised some sponsorship money to take with you to do various things. Did you see the money in action, as it were? What sort of money are we talking about?
For the schools, for Barabba School, our main focus has been trying to encourage nursery children to come to school. Primary children don't have to pay. That's funded, and something like 85% of children go to school in the Gambia now. There's been a big initiative on getting girls to school, because traditionally they stay at home and, look after the home and collect water and everything. But we've really worked at trying to help the nursery children, but they have to pay the equivalent of 20 pence a term. And for a lot of parents, they can't afford that and clothe them. So for the last 2 years, we've raised money and taken T-shirts with us. This year we're taking money, and I'm going to oversee material being bought and being made by a local tailor. So as Feifei says, they can have clothes for their bottoms as well. And also the money will go into the economy. We take all sorts of things. We buy exercise books and things like that, and various things. As far as the skills centre is concerned, a little money goes a very long way. As soon as I went, I was able to pay the internet bill, which was something like £6. Once that was paid, they could then, I can't remember which way round it was, but the phone bill had to be paid, and it's £3 here and £6 there and things like that. And housing for the generator, fire blocks they were called, but they had to be transported from the South Bank, so the donkey brought over 8 loads, and I think it was something like 30 Delassie, it was more than that, 300 Delassie, which is about £6. So your £6 and your £3 and your £4 here and there do a tremendous amount.
Oh, fantastic. This year you're going over now. I'd love to chat to you when you come back, if you may. But is this the last time, do you think, you'll be going over? And how do you feel about it if it is?
It's possibly the last time I'll go over with the support of the British Council, because the grant has come to an end and we will have to reapply. Whether that happens, I don't know, but I don't think it'll be the last time I go over.
Excellent. So you've got the travel bug as well as...
Yes, yes, definitely.
Excellent. Well, of all the things we've talked about and things I've asked you, I've got one final question. Of all the things I could have asked you, what should I have asked you?
Should other people do it?
And your answer?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Changes you. Changes your outlook on life completely. And why I had any worries about it in the first place, I really don't know.
Do you think more people who are at that point in their careers where they're just wondering if there's anything else to do should consider contributing or volunteering for anything like this? Yes,
most definitely. There are various ways of doing it. I know VSO is one of them, but I think that's quite a time commitment. It's usually a minimum, which is possibly too big a commitment for some people. But quite honestly, if you were ever to go to the Gambia on holiday, you could soon find some way of being able to help in some way. Gambia Tourist Support is a good site for advice and everything.
And of course the final thing would be the website that you set up that's associated with this project as well.
Yes, www.net-ferret.com, and I created an educational website about the Gambia after my first visit. Lots and lots of information there, mainly for children, but I know adults have looked at it with great interest.
Well, thanks very much indeed for your time, and I'd love to chat with you when you come back after your next adventure.
That would be fun. Late March.
Well, my thanks to Jane Smith there, and I hope there's been some useful information and perhaps a little inspiration in this podcast for those of you who might be considering something similar. Links to Jane's website will be on the show notes on the outdoorstation.co.uk, and I'm sure she'll be happy to answer any questions you might have about her experiences. Over the years, I've met numerous people who have decided to swap driving a desk for a chance to give something back to those who are less fortunate. None of them have ever regretted taking the step, even though they all felt very nervous about the unknown at the time. So that's about it from me. Make sure you visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk on a regular basis, as we'll be chatting to more travellers of all ages very soon, as well, of course, as listening to our other entertaining series of podcasts. If you're an iTunes user or you use another similar podcast aggregator, there's a very simple process to subscribe to the shows by just doing one click on the website or just copying and pasting some information. And that way all new podcasts will appear directly on your desktop the moment they are released. So you don't have to remember to visit us, we come straight to you. For more information, please visit the Subscribe Frequently Asked Questions page on the website. Until next time, folks, safe travels wherever you may go.
Find out how easy it is to subscribe to all our free programs. Visit our website at theoutdoorstation.co.uk.